think Janice touched on it earlier, so I'm going to follow up on her fantastic lead. I remember when we moved into this church.
Yeah.
I remember the pride of moving from, I saw my wife in the Joe Passes. Like, this used to be Flower Hill. My uncle, Reverend James Beasley, was a pastor over there. And I remember us being so proud as we walked from that building down the street, around the corner, into these doors. Yeah. And every time I walk into these doors, I'm so proud. I remember the calm and the peace of listening to and learning from my big uncle, Johnny Lee. Right there. Right there. Sunday after Sunday. So many of the sermons are carried with me to this very day. Yeah. Teachers, preachers, politicians, and people in general must understand and must realize that children are watching and they're learning. Not so much from what we say, because as a friend of mine said, Pat Lips will say anything, but from what we do. We must be ever mindful of the long-lasting impact that our actions have on others, especially our youth. If you heard all the things that people say today, we're all talking about things that occurred when we were like this. Believe it or not, it used to be that. But these are things that over the days, over the years, over the weeks, over the decades, they still carry with us and go forward. And for my part, I was blessed to be inspired by great people. Not good people, great people.
Yes.
I can talk about my mother, and I'm thankful that y'all separated me from her. Because you can't be too close to her. My Aunt Catherine. And there's so many, I can talk about those two until there's no oxygen in this room, but that would be easy. Y'all already know that. Yeah. I'm inspired by so many people. And I am what I am because of all of them. Yeah. You heard my Aunt Eula, my Aunt Mary Jean, the very first musician I ever played with. Right here. My Aunt Gloria, I see you back there. My grandmother Catherine, who would sit right here every Sunday. Sister Matt, Leroy, Willie Faye, all these people, everybody. And so I want to dedicate these few words I've been blessed to share to all of them. Because when I walk in, I still see them. Like the movie. I see their beat. All right. I see them all the time. I see them and I feel them. All right. So many things. In fact, all the things that I do, I started doing right here within the confines of this vision. Everything. From playing the drums in that corner to teaching Sunday school. And I really enjoyed playing the drums, but I derived the most pleasure teaching Sunday school. Going back to Eula May. She suggested that I teach Sunday school. And if anybody ever figured out a way to tell her no, you'd never share it with me. So there I was teaching Sunday school. However, reading and interpreting the scripture and then presenting to the class is something that several years later paid dividends for me. There I was in the French Quarter down in New Orleans, or the Marys, it's all the French Quarter. I applied to teach at a middle school, all boys Catholic school down outside the French Quarter. I was being interviewed. There were 9 bishops, like sitting in a semicircle, and they're all firing these questions at me. And one that I share with you, one of the gentlemen said, Mr. Joseph, we really like your resume. You seem to be a nice man, but you've never been a teacher. How do you feel you can teach? And I said, very calm, I said, well, sir, I respectfully disagree. I grew up teaching Sunday school in my church. And I've been in school since I was 3. If there's one thing I know something about, it's teaching school. That said, when my mother called me and she told me about this opportunity, it immediately occurred to me that I would take this as a chance to do something that I hadn't had the opportunity to do in a long time, so y'all have to bear with me. Because I want to teach Sunday school. So I asked her, I said, so where did the lesson come from? And she said, the 25th chapter of Matthew. And so if I got it wrong, chalk it up to my head, not my heart. And in fact, feel free to blame Bible Jean. I'm sure she can have it. When we turn to the 25th chapter of Matthew, we find not one, not two, but 3 separate parables. A couple of questions come readily to mind. As I viewed the 3 parables, it occurred to me that in each instance, the rich got richer. We'll get to that in a bit. But for now, what is a parable? And why was Jesus so fond of speaking in parables? Webster says that the parable is a simple, short story illustrating a moral or spiritual truth. And Jesus used them because he could communicate his message to people who would be open to hearing it, but also he could shield himself and protect himself because the people who didn't necessarily want to hear what he had to say might not know exactly what he was saying. Somewhat like the Steal Away song earlier. Right? The slaves would use those to speak in coded messages. Jesus used the parables the same way. With that in mind, let's talk briefly about the 3 parables in Matthew chapter 25.
Come on.
First, 10 virgins and their oil, or the lack thereof. 3 servants and their bags of gold. When I was growing up, I learned that one as the parable of the 10 talents. Right? And the shepherd who separated the sheep on the right and the goats on the left. 2 types. To make this point throughout the chapter, the writer speaks in lines of either or. Either a wise, forward-thinking virgin, or one who failed to plan. Either a wise, forward-thinking slave who took the opportunity to profit off of his master's donation, or one who failed to do so. Either a sheep or a goat. As for the 10 virgins, the overall takeaway is, I'm not going to read the verses. I think y'all have heard these parables. Am I wrong? As to the 10 virgins, the overall takeaway is to be spiritually prepared for the return of Jesus because the time is unknown. With the oil representing one's faith and readiness to meet him. The key points in the takeaway of the parable are all 10 virgins are considered to be followers of Christ, but their levels of preparedness differ. The oil symbolizes a person's spiritual life, their faith, and their active relationship with God. In the parable, the bridegroom symbolizes Jesus, who will return one day. The importance of being prepared. James talked about having multiple plans. Leon got up and said the same thing. So y'all don't have to believe me and ask them. The wise virgins who brought extra oil represent those who are actively living their faith and are prepared and ready for Jesus' return. While the foolish virgins then bring in the extra oil represent those who are not spiritually prepared. Thing 1. Flower here taught us to always be prepared. Be actively engaged in your faith and maintain a strong relationship with God. Be vigilant. Don't be complacent. Continuously nourish your faith through prayer, Bible study, and most of all, acts of service. Because again, a pair of lips will say anything. As for the 3 servants in the bags of gold, again, I learned this from the parable of the talents. The story emphasizes the importance of using one's gifts and abilities because God has given them to you. You owe it. You owe it. I tell my children all the time, you play the violin, you play the viola. If you took 10 people and lined them up, they'd all say, I want to play an instrument. Everybody wants to be able to play an instrument. They tell you, I can't sing, this is why I got the choir, start playing the drums. But you owe it to do those things you've been given the gift to do. Use them to your full potential. Don't let them lie dormant out of fear or laziness. Essentially, it teaches us that we be active in using what we've been given to serve God and serve others. And for those who do so, they will be rewarded. The key points of the parable, the master, that man represented God, right? He entrusted the servants each with a different amount of gold or talents, each according to his merit, right? The first 2 servants diligently used their gold to make profit, doubling the amount that they were given. The 3rd servant, out of fear, buried his gold in the ground and returned it to the master unchanged. The meaning, stewardship. The parable highlights the idea of being a good steward of what God's given you, whether it be material possessions, skills, or time, because all these things are different. Not better or worse, they're different. Responsibility. Each person is responsible to use their gifts to the best of their capacity, not holding on to them without any action. The reward. For those who actively use their gifts to serve God, they will be praised and they will be rewarded. The consequences of inaction. The servant who buried his gold is condemned for not using his gift and is punished. In other words, use it or lose it. The flower here taught us to use our gifts. And lastly, for the parable of the sheep and the goats. This one involves a story told by Jesus where he describes the final judgment scene. I can see it. A final judgment scene where people are separated into 2 groups. The sheep on the right, the goats on the left. Essentially highlighting the importance of caring for the less fortunate and demonstrating compassion toward others as a key aspect of living a righteous life. I'm not talking about it, actually living. But I learned from my mama more than anything, is get up every day and go do it. Do it every day. You don't feel like doing it every day, but you have to go do it. I try to instill that in my children every day. Like rain, every day. The key points of this parable: Jesus as a judge separates people like a shepherd would. Sheep, goats. The sheep represent those who follow God's will, and the goats represent those who did not. The least of these, the parable emphasizes the importance of helping those in need, referring to them as the least of my brothers. This could include the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the sick, and the imprisoned. Again, actions matter. The sheep are not commended for their belief alone, but for their actions. And they didn't even realize why God was blessing them. They've been so busy doing the work. The sheep are welcomed into heaven, while the goats are sent away to eternal punishment. The parable teaches social responsibility. I learned that right here in Flywheel. We are called to actively care for the needs of others, especially the marginalized and the vulnerable, the least of us. Identifying with God by serving others, we are essentially serving God Himself. Because how can you love the God that you don't see? By serving them to those you do see. Judgment based on actions. Our actions in life will be a significant factor in determining our eternal destiny. I would argue they would be the only factor in determining our eternal destiny. Flywheel taught us to serve others with our actions. In addition to the virgins and their oil, and the servants and their bags of gold, and the sheep and the goats, I would add that on the whole, people are either givers or takers.
Come on now.
In my 53 years,
All right.
I've seen givers and takers. The older I get, the more I see this. You see it across all walks of life. And I promise you, people know if they givers or takers. They're not fooled by what they are. They know. As we age, we learn, or we should learn, that it is far better to be a giver than a taker. During youth, it is natural to think about yourself, to be selfish. But as we age, it will behoove us to consider those around us, to consider the whole. In that regard, as I try my best to navigate our current political situation, the thought that kept bouncing around in my head is that verse from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I thought as a child. I was reminded of that verse for some reason, so I went and looked it up in the Bible that I got from over here. I decided to take a peek at the verses around it to give it some context. So let's take a look at these verses together. Bear with me for a second.
Help yourself.
Verse 1. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give all over my body and the hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. This is what I hear.
Come on.
Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. By the way, this is the one I love right here. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angry. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with truth. Something that is lost on us these days, the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes. It always perseveres. Love never fails. And where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be still. Where there is knowledge, they will pass away. For we know in part, we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put away childhood. Put it behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully. Even as I am fully known. And now these three remain. This is a big payoff. Faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And as I went back to the first verse in the chapter, it hit me. It's no secret. We all know, but right there in our face was the key to the whole shooting match. Love. If you boil it all down to its essence, there's love. And I got it right here in abundance. Now, I know the Facebook post and the information regarding today's event spoke of the good that came out of Flower Hill.
Yeah.
But if you know me at all, then you know I sometimes have a strange relationship with following the rules.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump a little bit, and I'm gonna, instead of talking about the good that came out of Flower Hill, I want to talk about the love that went into Flower Hill. Back to Matthew chapter 25, and the parable about the sheep and the goats. The king gave the sheep credit for the blessings that they bestowed upon him, and the sheep, those on the right, were dumbfounded. They didn't realize the king was speaking of love that they shown the least of us. This church has been a righteous church. It has never been one of those mega churches in terms of numbers.
Come on now.
But that's okay.
That's right.
Certainly there was a time we were all younger, and the numbers were greater, right? But what our church lacked in quantity, it always made it up.
Come on now.
And I take quality over quantity any
Any
day.
day. Come on now.
That said, when I say the rich are getting richer in what? Money? Possessions? Esteem?
Come on now.
What we witness in our country right now, policies that are going to benefit people who don't need benefit, right? In exchange for tax benefits for those who don't need them, the powers that be are going to increase the tax burden on the rest of us.
Yeah.
We're going to do away with good quality education for those who need it. We're going to do away with health care, affordable health care for people who rely on it. Programs for people who struggle for food. Things of this nature. And rather than feeding the hungry or quenching the thirst of the parched, they will do the exact opposite. And feel as though they're gaining in riches. But they're actually mortgaging their eternal life.
Come on now. Come on now.
I don't know a lot, but I do know that bill will ultimately come due.
It will come.
I haven't seen the end of this movie,
Come on now.
but I'm glad to believe that nobody gets out alive.
Come on now.
As the writer said in reference to goats, then they will go away to eternal punishment. But for the sheep, the givers among us, those who operate outside themselves for the benefit of others, to them, the righteous, theirs is eternal life. And I know for a fact, that's the line I want to be standing in. That's all said and done.
Yeah.
When we look back over the entire book that's been our life, we will no doubt be reminded of all the givers who went out of their way to help us along on our journey. Some people are so full of pride, foolishly, that they believe that whatever success they've experienced in this life, they did it by themselves. For me, I always felt like I was part of the team.
Yeah.
When I was off in school in Virginia, for example, broke bud would walk down to the mailbox and somehow or other magically there'd be a check in it from sister so-and-so. And with that check, I would buy gas, or I would buy something to eat, or I'd pay a light bill, or something like that. And I always felt obligated to keep going forward for those people because they sacrificed for me. Those givers gave to me, and it is now my turn to give to others. We must train ourselves to think outside of ourselves and to think in terms of ways that benefit the whole. That is not to say that you completely disregard yourself. But you must also be mindful of the fact that there are those who, despite what you may think, are less fortunate than we are. It is on us to assist them when we can. Those are the thought processes that we manage. These are the things that we can control. I'm reminded of the way that baby elephants in the circus are trained. When the circus gets a new elephant, it'll take this baby elephant and it'll take a 10-foot tent stake, drive it in the ground with massive chains around the elephant. And the baby elephant can't move no matter how hard it tries. But as the elephant ages and gets stronger, it still doesn't know that it can move away from that tent. It can move away if it wants to because it's been conditioned in its mind. We must unchange our mind. I told you a quick story from Booker T. Washington. In 1895, Washington gave a speech at the Cotton States and International Exposition that was held in Atlanta that year. Washington was charged with convincing the Northerners that racial progress had been made in the South. To accomplish this task, he turned to the novel Moby Dick. He told a story. In the story, a ship had got lost in the Atlantic Ocean. The ship's captain sent out a distress signal for help. Those on the ship were dying of thirst, and they pleaded for drinking water. The ship that was close by signaled back, "Cast down your bucket where you are." The crew received the signal and concluded that they must have been misunderstood. Surely they couldn't put the buckets down in the Atlantic Ocean and drink a cream of water that they could drink. So they signaled back again, distress for help. They need drinking water. This went on back and forth for a while, and finally they put their bucket down and drew it up, and they got drinking water. and they drank it to their delight. They didn't realize they were close to the mouth of the Amazon River. Washington offered a story as a suggestion on both sides of the aisle, black, white, Democrat, Republican, that they should cast down their buckets one among each other in a way that would ultimately benefit everybody involved. I offer the story for a simple purpose. I encourage you to cast down your bucket right here in Shreveport, right here in Flower Hill. Improve the lives of yourself and those around you, and do it for the good of the whole. Don't be like the one who buried his talents and thereby deprived the world of his gifts. Let that love that Flower Hill poured into you shine out in the full world, and do it in abundance. Thank you.